IIT, IIM, Accenture, MD, you start to think that this person has always been very academics focused. But the reality is that I was far from that. So onwards, I'm running 100 half marathons for 100 consecutive days. And I don't shy away from saying that. I mean, it's not a philanthropic world. Businesses are in the business of making profits, creating shareholder returns.
Today we have our first guest on the show, Sundeep, good friend of mine, super achiever from multiple perspectives, and someone who I really look up to for inspiration when it comes to determination. Now, we have a lot to uncover in this next 1 hour or whatever, as much time as we do have. Sandeep, welcome to the podcast with professors. Right.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Matthew. And it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm very excited about the conversation that lays ahead of us. So really looking forward to it.
Great. Great. So I'll maybe give a short introduction about you, really short, because I
Sure.
want you to talk about yourself as much as possible, and then we'll go forward with that. Sandeep is an IIT Delhi alumnus. He is also an IIM Kozhikode. So he's that typical IIT IIM um, ripe fruit out there. He is a managing director with a very large global consulting firm. He's free to reveal the name if he feels comfortable. And beyond that, he is someone who has inspired many with his marathon running abilities. He is someone who took up a challenge and ran 100 half marathons over consecutive days. So there wasn't even 1 day break in between, whether he was in India, abroad, Delhi, wherever. He was running every day, right? And I've seen photographs of the injuries on his feet and his consumption of turmeric milk that he used to have for all of that. And yeah, so that's one. That's after an IIT, IIM degree and working with such a large firm, he also ran so many marathons. And then the latest thing that he surprised everyone with was this book, right? He even found time to write a book. So, Sandeep, the way I think we'll go about this is the way you've taken the route for the book. We talk about maybe your childhood and your time getting to the IITs. So that's where the book stops. But then we want to go beyond that. We want to
Sure.
discuss about your time at IIT, at IIM Kozhikode, and beyond that, maybe your work, how your work, and so you handle a very important, very critical sort of responsibility, right? It's your work revolves around sustainability,
That's correct.
which is well recognized as the backbone for things going forward. So a little bit around that, and your half marathons, yes, that we anyone who I mentioned that I'm going to be talking to Sandeep, they're like, oh, the guy who's done those 100 half marathons. So that, and we'd also like to understand your book writing time, right? Because that is also an inspiration for us and for other listeners who'd be there about how you struggled with that book writing and how actually it happened over time. So
For
over to
sure.
you, Professor Victor. Do you want to add something before we start on this?
No, absolutely. So when George told me that you are coming, right? So he sent me a LinkedIn link as I visited your profile, okay? And then I have a habit like whenever I see someone's profile, I also do some bit of search on Google to see around the kind of work and everything. And I stumbled upon a video actually
Uh-huh.
of your half marathon days, right? It was very well shot and all of the things. And what surprised me was that you ran those half marathons every single day, right? That's what really what I had thought. I mean, George had told me that you run half marathons, but what really struck with me is that you ran every single day for 21 kilometers, if I'm not
Yeah,
wrong, right?
that is
That
correct.
is something very different, right? So that's what I'm very excited about to talk to. But then, Sandeep, why did you start with your journey, right from your say childhood days, how this journey started, and then we'll come in and we'll ask more questions around that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not at all surprised to hear that you are both excited and surprised with that achievement of mine in terms of running 100 half marathons. Because, even as of today, it's been about 3, 4 years since I did that. And even as of today, people recognize me more as that Sardar who runs, and not as that professional who works as well, or as that kind of guy who has multiple other responsibilities. So even in my society, most people, when they are looking for me, they won't ask me any other thing, or they won't ask the guards any other thing. They'll just say, we want to go to that guy, that the tall sick guy who runs a lot. And yeah, so it has almost become like my recognition card. But that said, very happy to be talking about this journey, and probably we'll start from the beginning in terms of how this has all panned out. So uh, I'm 40 right now in terms of my age, and we all evolve with time. I mean, I have seen my own evolution. I have seen how the thought process has changed, how the priorities have changed, how the ways of looking at things has changed over the last several years. In fact, 3 or 4 decades now. So if I were to think about what life used to be when I was a child, I think I was always a very happy-go-lucky kind of a kid who would take a lot of pride in playing pranks, who will take a lot of pride in playing cricket. If you ask me a few things which I was very passionate about as a kid, I think a few things really stand out. One, I was always a milk addict. I mean, this is one thing which I have always been very fond of, regardless of where I am and what day, time of the day it is. I would want my share of milk. And that's one thing which used to get me very cranky if I wouldn't get my milk on time. In fact, there is an anecdote that I had once locked my grandmother inside the kitchen when there was nobody at home because she got delayed in giving me milk. And I had already requested her 3 times that I want my share of milk. And it was the peak summer. There was no fan in the kitchen. And I just took the liberty to lock her out. And I was like, now you pay the price. I'm not going to open you up till the others come and let you out of this small little kitchen that you are now locked in. So that was like when I was 3 or 4 years old. So this is one of my most oldest memory of what I recall vividly, having done something mischievous. Now, as time evolved, I got a lot of kind of passion and enjoyment in terms of reading all those little diamond comics that we as kids were used to. So things like Chacha Chaudhary and Sabu, and I know in hindsight, as of today, when we speak about those diamond comics, it almost sounds embarrassing that there was a time when I used to take pride in reading those, and I used to look forward to those comics. But the truth be told, I was like absolutely thrilled when I would get a handle of those kind of comics, and my weekends would be made. So that was the second thing which I was absolutely passionate about. Third thing was that I think it was in my sixth standard or sixth or seventh standard when I was probably, it was maybe around 95, 96, that kind of a time frame, when I first happened to see one of the knocks of Sachin Tendulkar in 96 World Cup. I think it was the match against Sri Lanka, and he had blasted some 137 odd runs. And that was the first time I was watching a match of cricket. And just the whole euphoria that I witnessed around me, the kind of excitement that I saw with people, and the craze of somebody by the name of Sachin Tendulkar watching out. I still tell my wife that Sachin Tendulkar happens to be my first love in life. You are my second love. I love you more than Sachin Tendulkar today, but the truth be told, Sachin Tendulkar was always my first love. So in fact, I became so paranoid and so committed to that loyalty that is towards Sachin that I have almost landed myself in trouble at different points in time in my life. So I mean, I'm talking about the childhood days, but this was in my IT days. I had actually beaten up one of my seniors who was saying something bad about Tendulkar, and I was banned from visiting the common room for 6 consecutive months. So that was like, and I still take a lot of pride. I mean, even with the advantage of hindsight and all the experience that I have gathered over the years, if I were to go back with the same level of experience, I would have still beaten him because he was saying things about Sachin that he should not have said. So that's a little bit about what my childhood was. I'll also add one thing. I mean, when you think about things like IIT, IIM, Accenture, MD, you start to think that this person has always been very academics focused. But the reality is that I was far from that. I was always somebody who would want to see good marks, but I was never somebody who would be good in studies or who would be like, committed to academics or even care for homeworks and those kind of things. Especially the languages and social sciences used to get the worst out of me. In fact, I have had to rely upon my mom many times to complete my homework. And always the debate used to be that your handwriting is so bad, that is, my handwriting is so bad, how would I do your homework? Because the teacher would immediately know. And as caring as she was, he used to write with her left hand. She was a right-handed person. She used to write with her left hand to make it as illegible and as dirty and as ugly as my handwriting. So that's what kind of is the genesis of this journey. I mean, happy-go-lucky, very fond of comics, very fond of cricket, would never miss a chance to be in the field playing with my friends, would love to play pranks, would love to trouble people. I was a troublemaker at home. And yeah, last but not the least, a little bit of a love for marks, though, as I said, never ever willing to study or never ever willing to put in the effort. So that's the early childhood days.
Okay. So, Sandeep, who do you identify more with, Chacha Chaudhary or Sabu? Because
I think
your degrees reflect a Chacha Chaudhary, all your actions and the beating up reflect more of a Sabu.
I would think that it's more of Sabu. I think let's put it that it's a Sabu who has learned to put a mask and play that Chacha Chaudhary in real life, but I'm more of a Sabu at heart. I mean, you talk to my batchmates having played me in games of table tennis, for example. I would get so excited and so energetic at an inconsequential match where nothing is at stake. It's just a recreational match. But I just used to love competing, love playing games, love getting serious about everything that I was doing, and I also feel like I used to bring a lot of strength and that hot-headedness in everything that I used to do, which is more of Sabu and not so much of Chacha Chaudhary. So, and I think at heart it is still that. So things like running 100 half marathons, I'm sure a Chacha Chaudhary would never do that. Maybe a Sabu would still take a stab at it.
Absolutely. So, Sandeep, you talked of Sachin, and I share the same admiration, but I'm sure not to the level that you have, right? So, I want to bring talk, and I know you'd love to talk about him. So, how did Sachin, I mean, his persona and whatever he did, how did he shape your life beyond the love and the admiration?
Yeah.
How real was he in whatever decisions you took in life?
So, see, there are a lot of these small incidents which just stick to you. So I used to think about it quite a lot, and I still think about it. He was just 16 when he was facing the likes of Waseems and Wakars on the cricket field in Pakistan in a hostile environment. Now, it was very easy for somebody like him to get hit on the face and say that, yeah, this is not working out for me. This is way too difficult for me. But the young kid that he was at the age of 16, surrounded by literally, killers, the kind of bouncers they used to bowl, they were all really, really mighty bowlers. He fought it out. And a lot of times when I see people around me, I feel like there is almost a joy that people derive out of playing the victim card. And what I mean by that is a lot of times you don't get what you desire in life for whatever reasons. Could be, beyond your locus of control as well. But then they just conveniently believe that by subconsciously putting the blame on externalities, they can conveniently move on. I mean, think about that little guy who was playing the likes of Vakar and Wasim. He could have played the victim card. I'm bleeding. I'm a kid. I have to my board exams going on. So maybe this is not the right time. I could come back after 6 years. But he just stuck on. And that tells me that there is a lot of power in perseverance. If you just decide to not quit, if you just say that this is something that I'm not going to get out of till you kill me. I mean, if I'm alive, I'll keep fighting. As long as I'm breathing, I'll keep fighting. Then things do happen. And that's an incident which I thought a lot about when I was doing those 100 half marathons. So I think Matthew, you were saying that you have seen some images of those injuries as well. There was a time, I think, when I was doing my 60th or 70th half marathon, when my feet were so swollen that a normal shoe would not even go up my foot, and I had to actually run barefoot. And I was telling myself the same thing, that this will come to an end only if I die on this running track. As long as I'm breathing, I am not going to go back now. So there is no going back. I mean, I've made an announcement, I've made a commitment, and it's for a cause. I'm doing this to spread awareness about air pollution. So there is no going back. So I think coming back to your question, Victor, I think that Sachin small incidents used to tell me that you just need to defy all odds if you really are committed to something. I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware of this small little incident which happened in the 2003 World Cup. Uh, we were playing well and we had made it to the finals, and Sachin was down with diarrhea and loose motions in one of the games, and it was an important game against Sri Lanka. It was like a knockout match, and India would have suffered significantly if we had stepped out of that match. The guy wore tissues under his underwear and went and played. Can you imagine? I mean, the kind of discomfort that we're talking about. I mean, I know it sounds a little embarrassing, but just imagine the kind of mental setup that this guy had to be playing wearing tissues just so that if there is something, given the diarrhea and all the fluid loss that is happening, he doesn't have to come back and he can continue batting. And he went on to score 97 in that discomfort and was the man of the match for that. And there are infinite such incidents, small little incidents, which tell you that you will never lose unless you lose in your mind. You will never lose
Mhm.
unless you decide to quit. The game is
Right,
on.
right.
It might take you
Absolutely.
longer. It might bring a lot of discomfort to you. But if you are willing to stay put, things will happen. As simple as that. Period. So I mean, those are the kind of things which I think about, which Tendulkar has really inspired me to kind of shape my career and my journey and my ways of looking at things.
Right. In fact, you talked of 2003 World Cup. If I'm not wrong, and we lost only to Australia, two matches, only to
Yes.
Australia in the final and I
Yes.
guess in the league. And those are the only
Yeah.
two matches where Sachin did not score a half century. In
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
matches, Sachin had scored more than 50 and had won, right? These are two
Oh,
matches where
absolutely.
Sachin didn't score, if I'm not wrong on this, but and these are two matches we lost, right? And the
He
impact he
scored
had.
673 runs. I mean, some
Yeah,
of these
it's just
statistics with Sachin are so well etched in my mind. The 96 World Cup, he scored 523. 2003 World Cup, he
ah,
scored 673. And I can put my last dollar on the stake on the table to bet that it was 673. It was not 674 or 672. So
right.
some of those things are really, really fresh in my mind.
How did you feel when he announced his retirement? Like, what is that feeling for you?
So it was 2013, and
Yeah.
I was obviously a father then. My son was 3 years old, and I have to admit that when he was walking back for the final time, I started crying, and it was very, very embarrassing for me because a father is not supposed to shed tears in front of a young kid. Like, it's something that my son's name is Ekam. I was like, what would Ekam be thinking at this point in time? I mean, it has never happened with me. I don't even recall before that when I had last actually let the tears come out, but it just happened. And my son asked my mom, my wife, Japneet, that why is father crying? I mean, this is bizarre. At the age of 3, he was getting upset to see his father crying. And mom told, Japneet told Ekam that it's like such he's a big fan of Sachin and it's the last time he's walking back. So he's getting a little upset that he will never see. So the young little kid that he was, even at the age of 3, he had something to offer. He was like, Papa, YouTube पे देख लिया करेंगे बैटिंग तो इतना घबराने की बात नहीं है. And in fact, I did happen to meet Sachin once in one of my running events. So he was there, and I was not running in that particular event, but I still kind of registered for that event. I created a compilation of some of those most important and memorable events and incidents that I had, memories of Sachin, as I used to call them. One of them was the same thing that I talked about. I had beaten somebody and got banned from the college room because somebody had said bad thing. One of them was exactly this. And the last one was when I was getting engaged, when I was sitting on the podium in all that sherwani and everything in Amritsar. It so happened that Tendulkar was playing against Australia and he was batting. And I was
Uh,
like, oh, what the hell do I do now? I'm supposed to be sitting here and everybody's clicking me and I am the limelight. And you know what? Sachin is batting. So I told my wife, and that's the moment when I told her that I love you more than Sachin, but Sachin was the first love, and he's batting right now. So I'm going to play some tricks. I'm going to step out on the pretext of going to the washroom or whatnot every 5 minutes because there was a screen that was playing Tendulkar outside that banquet hall. So then my wife was very supportive and she said that why would you have to step out? We'll both go. So we somehow squeezed out of that party and in our sherwani, then she was wearing a heavy lehenga and all the jewelry like a typical marriage would entail in Punjab. And we went outside the banquet hall. Behind the banquet hall, there was a Bhature Wala ka shop where there was a small TV. And in that attire, we watched that entire match. And Sachin scored 100 in that match, by the way. And that
wow.
auspicious day became a little more auspicious for us. So, I mean,
Right.
I listed down these memories and I handed it over to Sachin. That I said that whenever you get time in the flights or in transit, etc., I would love for you to read this. And the humble little man that he was, amidst all the people, I mean, there were at least 30,000 people around the stadium at that time for the event. He stood there and read it absolutely end to end, right there in front of everyone. And he said that this means a lot to me, and I really kind of value, the wishes and the blessings of you all. Fans like you is what gets me going. So I mean, these are like some of those most precious moments of my life, I would say.
For me personally, I did not get teary-eyed when he was walking for the last time. It was during the speech that he gave.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
made me very emotional, right? And that
yeah,
also,
yeah,
whenever I sometimes see that, that makes me
yeah,
very emotional. That was very different, right? It just entire his entire journey as a 25 years, right? This is
yeah.
very, very emotional.
Let's
Yeah.
not
So
even talk about it because I tend to get
yeah,
very emotional as well when I talk
exactly.
about it.
Exactly. So let's just change gears. But since we are talking Sachin and sports, I want to ask you, like, when you're thinking of the half marathon, right? And it was for a cause for air pollution. So I want to think, reflect on what was going on. I mean, why was this cause so special to you? And did you really have any idea how difficult this is going to be? I mean, I know you surely knew how difficult, but when you were going through this and before you were when you were conceiving this, okay, this is something I'm going to run. Uh, what was going on and why was this cause so special to you? What steered you?
So, a few things. I think it was around 2012 to 2016 when I was changing as a person in many ways. I mean, I used to start thinking about a lot of things. In fact, overthinking at times, is, if you will. And I used to get very emotional and passionate about things. That was a little bit of a change I was seeing, as opposed to Sandeep, that was up till about 2010, who would be completely disconnected to the world. I'll have a very few set of friends, and I couldn't care less about what's going on, what people are partying, and they're having fun. I'll be in my own kind of a zone. But that was the phase when I was undergoing this kind of a change, and I said that I was not running in that event when Sachin was there and I got a chance to interact with him. I was not running because I had just come out of an episode of severe, some kind of a breathing problem because of all the air pollution that was there. After Diwali, it happens every year. It's like a annual ritual for us here in North India. So that was one thing which was playing on my mind. That for somebody like me who has always been a fitness freak, who would always work out, who has never even touched alcohol once, for no fault of mine, I had to go through that almost about 5 to 6 months of completely off sports, off the usual physical activities because of that breathing problem. So that was one. And second was, it was the first time when we started to see that schools were getting shut down. There were a few days when schools were shut down just because the quality of air was so bad. And I was like, what has life come down to? I mean, in our days, it would never ever happen that a school is shut down because the air is bad. Can you imagine? I mean, we are not talking about luxuries of life. We are not talking about some massive comforts which money can buy you. We are talking about something as elementary as just breathing in and breathing out. And even that is like has become like such a big thing, then there is something seriously wrong. So I felt like the same thing. Don't play the victim card. It won't take you anywhere if you keep cribbing about it. If you want to do something about it, then spread the awareness. You are in a position where you kind of help your clients talk about sustainability, ESG, climate change, and whatnot. Then be true to your profession and try to do something about it. So the whole idea was that I ran a mini social media campaign on the back of those 100 half marathons, 5th March to 12th June. And the idea was that every week I would post about how the last week's half marathons were, give an account of the GPS enabled tracking. And on the back of that, also talk about a few ideas, things like simple daily activities and practices that everybody should follow to be able to create that small impact, which when aggregated over 1.4 billion people would be like a massive impact. So that was the intent. So I think a bit of realization about what I was as a professional, a bit of hurt in the sense that what I was seeing around me and those kind of things. And to your point, that did I think about what it would entail? Sometimes when you get emotional, you make wrong decisions. Let me be very honest. I mean, I know it might sound very fancy for me to say that, yeah, I was up for the challenge and, I had thought about it and I went ahead with it. But the reality is that I did not think about it as much as I should have. I mean, if I were to go back on that day when I decided that I'm doing this, and by the way, it happened over a red light. I was getting frustrated at a red light on, I think, 3rd of March. And I told my wife that tomorrow I'll take some rest, 4th of March, and 5th of March onwards, I'm running 100 half marathons for 100 consecutive days. And she was like, what is wrong with you? Where did that come out of? I mean, at a simple, you put down the FM on lower the volume, and this is what you announce. And she was like, you don't need to prove at every possible instant that you are a Sardar at heart. I mean, it's okay. Take a break. But that's how it happened. And I think first 5 or 6 half marathons happened quite easily. Around 10th is when the euphoria associated with something big that I was trying to achieve had gone down. People had also moved on, in the sense that initial few days there was a lot of hype. Everybody was like talking about it, and I was always feeling celebrated. But that celebration lasts only for a few days. After that, it's a lot of hard work, and people have started moving on, and they'll take a notice of it once in a while when you make a LinkedIn or a Twitter or a social media post. But other than that, everybody had kind of calmed down. And that's where I realized that I have a big task ahead of me. I have made such massive announcements all over the world, on every single platform and every single friend that I know. And now there is no going back. And this is just 10th half marathon. There are 90 more such half marathons to go, and it's only going to become more and more difficult with the level of fatigue that I was accumulating. But then I think it's a case of mind over matter. You just have to take one step at a time. If you start looking ahead, too far ahead in a journey, things can feel overwhelming. But if you just look at, let's say, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do tomorrow? And that's it. I used to tell myself that today is not the day when I'm aborting this campaign. Maybe tomorrow, I'll see. And then when tomorrow comes, it has already become today. So that day I'll tell myself that today is not the day when I'm aborting this. So it was like every single day I would mentally know that tomorrow it might just come to an end, because for all you know, I'll be heavily injured. I'll not be able to get out of the bed. But with God's grace, every single day, I made it to the start line, and just went through the motion. So it kind of happened after that.
Sandeep, so I want to ask you about the transition. This is one step before even you decided to run these 100 half marathons. The transition from someone who did not complete an 800-meter race to someone who started running half marathons. How did that transition happen? For me, my personal story is that I had never run a long distance earlier, and then I went for a mountaineering course, came back, and I realized that it was all in the mind, right? That running 500 meters is the same as running 3 kilometers, which is the same as running 10 kilometers. And then, so went from running a maximum of 1 kilometer ever in a day to
Uh-huh.
running 300 sorry 3 kilometers to running 6 kilometers to running a half marathon over a
Yeah.
1 week span, right?
Yeah.
Because I felt that it was all in the mind. What was your journey? How did that transition happen for you?
So for me, it was again after I had finished my education, after I graduated out of IMK, I had started working. And typically, when you start to get a lot of access to resources, up till about the point when you are a student, your resources are limited. You don't have a lot of money to splurge around. But then suddenly you start earning, and those dinners and lunches with the teams and all of that kind of becomes like a normal routine of life. So I had started putting on a little bit of weight. Despite all my focus on fitness, I had gone up to about 93 or 94 kgs at that point in time. So that was the time when I was actually interviewing somebody in my office for a consultant's role. And after doing all the usual business case and all that kind of discussion, I towards the end asked him that what is it that you do in your spare time? What kind of hobbies do you pursue? So that guy, his name was Gautam Krishnan. He said that I run half marathons. So that was the first time I had heard about half marathons. I knew it was like a long distance thing, and also I asked him a bit more about what it entails. So he said that you have to run 21 kilometers or you have to run 42 kilometers. And I was like really surprised. I had never imagined that people like us can actually go that distance on feet, right? So I came back home and I told my wife that, you know what, I met a person who runs 100 who runs half marathons and full marathons. And she was like, why don't you go and try for yourself? How much can you run? So we live in a society where one loop is about 600 meters, and that's where that competitive me comes out. I was like, okay, let's try it out. So that same night, late in the night when everybody had gone back to sleep, I stepped out for a run, and I was like very committed that if not 21, maybe 10, maybe 15. As it turned out, I was breathless after 2 rounds, which is less than 1.2 kilometers as per that loop distance. So that's where that hurt self-worth, or call it whatever, ego, or just the fact that I was so far behind in terms of my fitness levels. So then on the same day I announced, this was I think somewhere around the month of February or March. I came back, I Googled what are the big running events in India. So I kind of chanced upon this event called Airtel Delhi Half Marathon, which used to happen every year. Now it's called Vedanta Delhi Half Marathon, which was planned for 23rd of November in that year. So I told myself and Japneet that we are sitting in March. In November, I'm going to run a half marathon. So that's where the journey started, Matthew. And then it's the same thing. When you get into the groove, you realize that it's not so much about physical comfort. It's more about your mental setup. The same kind of rigor is what you will need to go from 15 to 20 is what you would need to go from, let's say, 85 to 100. And that 1 kilometer slowly became two, and then that became four, and then in no time, within a couple of months or 3 months, I had done the full distance. And then it became about, I want to do it faster. I want to improve my timing as well. I'm no longer satisfied with just doing a half marathon. And then, I started chasing a timing. So I don't know if you are aware of these running timings and all, but if you are able to run a half marathon in less than 1 hour 30 minutes, it's considered reasonably fast for people like us who are also working and all. So it took me about a couple of years to get down to 1 hour 29 minutes and 36 seconds. I recall that number very vividly. And then I was like, I need to improve it further. So eventually it reached 1 hour 25 minutes and 16 seconds, which happened a few months back. And yeah, I mean, it's still something that I'm working on. I every single day tell myself that 1 hour 25 has to become 1 hour 24 now. So it just keeps you motivated. I mean, if there is a target in front of you, which you have to work towards, which you have to inculcate a lot of discipline for, it gives you a purpose in life. So that's what I've been doing. I mean, you'll be surprised to hear that as big a foodie as I used to be when I was in colleges, I used to have, Matthew, you are aware of these fried Maggies and all of that kind of stuff we used to have in our NC. And you name it. I mean, Coke and aerated drinks and everything. 2013 onwards, I haven't had dinner after 6:30 p.m. any single day. I would not have carbs after 6:30 p.m. And it's been a routine that I have been able to follow for the last 10 years now. So it's all in the mind. I mean, not just running, everything is all in the mind.
Absolutely. So maybe I'll just ask one more question from your half marathon. So what after those say 10, 15 days when you say that now the journey is started to become really tough and because the public layer has started to reside. Now that time, what kept you going? Was it the cause? Was it your own determination that comes that since I've taken this up, I'll do it? Or is it the promises that you've already made public? What really kept you going there in those difficult days? Right. So.
So again, I mean, it might sound very good for me to say that it was the cause that kept me going. But if I have to be absolutely honest with you, I don't think it was the cause that kept me going after that. It was, and maybe it sounds petty, but it was that sense of ego and that sense of self-respect, that how can I go back on my word if I have announced it to the world that this is what I'm doing. Going back on my word is akin to saying that I did not live up to what I had committed. So I think the cause was the starting trigger, but what kept me going was not the cause. It was more of that mindset, that kind of value system in terms of not letting go of your words, basically, is what was the driving force from 10th all the way till 100th half marathon.
Okay. So while 100 half marathons requires a lot of commitment, writing a book also requires a lot of commitment. Somewhere we'd like to explore and unravel that aspect of your life also.
So
Also, I realize that your book stops at your reaching or your successfully achieving the JEE admission, right?
yeah,
But so that somewhere about what's left beyond that, if you could
sure.
introduce us. Right, so
No,
maybe we'll
absolutely.
start with writing the book.
Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. So I think again the decision to write a book was as spontaneous as the decision to run 100 half marathons. I never thought about it constructively or in a structured manner. In the sense that I was actually participating in a full marathon event, and I used to always have this knack of running with music on. It used to keep my mind distracted when I'm running. But it was the first time I was actually running a full marathon without music. So I reached the start line and I was like, why did I do that? I should have carried music. 42 kilometers is a lot of distance. I mean, even if I were to do well, I would be running for 3.5 hours at a stretch all by myself. So I said, let's do something creative. At every kilometer mark, I'll think about what life used to be at that numerical age. So whatever limited memory I might have of that numerical age. So when I'm running third kilometer, I'll think about the age of 3 years, whatever I have as a memory. When I'm running 17th kilometer, I'll think about that. So in a way, I was 36 kilometer at that time. In a way, I almost relived my life in those 36 kilometers. Kind of flashbacks came when I saw the pictures of that run. They take a lot of pictures when you are on the track. And there were moments when I was smiling. There were also moments when I had tears in my eyes. So it was a very nostalgic kind of a run. And when I reached the 36-kilometer, I was like, what the hell do I do now? Because I still have to run the next 6 kilometers and I am 36. So there is nothing to think about. And those are the most difficult last few kilometers of a full marathon when you are completely fatigued and, hydration levels have dropped down and all that kind of physical discomfort has already kicked in. So it was in those last 6 kilometers that I said that I'm going to write a book about the emotions and the feelings which I felt most strongly about during that run. And for me, that happened to be the time around 16th and 17th, around 18th kilometer, and translated to my life, the time when I was preparing for JE, is what really kind of struck a chord in the sense that I was getting really passionate about those few years. So that was the genesis of the idea of writing the book. But then about the book itself, Matthew, I think uh, that's an age which is considered a very slippery territory in the sense that you are evolving from being a child to becoming a man, and there are lots of physical distractions. There are a lot of social distractions in the sense that suddenly you start getting attracted towards girls and you start getting attracted towards some of those usual things which you hadn't thought about in the early parts of your life. And it's a slippery phase, let's be honest. And in hindsight, I mean, as it stands today, I feel like my son has already seen the successful version of me. So when he sees me running, he has seen me running half marathons and ultra marathons and hundreds and whatnot. When he sees me in office, he sees me as a managing director. When he looks at my career, he hears about IITs and IIMs, and he has seen that. I wanted him to be aware because now is the time when he is also getting into that phase of life, that life is never easy. I mean, again, in hindsight, it looks beautiful, but you always have to go through your fair share of distractions and troubles and lows in life, and you have to figure out a way of overcoming those. So for me, it was like when I was in my 11th standard, I was the same old kid that used to derive pleasure out of playing cricket and talking about Sachin and getting a hold of comics and whatnot. So suddenly I was overwhelmed when I joined the FICCI Institute for preparations, and I was also obviously going to my school. And it suddenly occurred to me that life is so difficult. One fine day, it has become such difficult life because you have to get up at 8 o'clock, you go to the school, come back at 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m., you're going to the coaching institute, you come back at 9 p.m., and then you have your dinner, and then you have to do your homework, and then you have to study about those institute concepts. And this is not going to happen for the next 2 years. So I talked to my friends that what are your plans, boss? This is not the way we are going to live for the rest of our schooling life, whatever is left of it. So he said that it's only going to get better from here because your mom never lets you step out of the house before 5 p.m. in the usual circumstances. Now, when you have a class at 3 p.m. in the FITG Institute, you have to leave the house at 2:30 p.m. And then you decide wherever you want to go. You want to go to the FITG Institute, you go there. You want to go and play, you go and play. And I was like, I didn't realize that maybe it was more like one of those humorous remarks, but I took it very seriously. I took it to heart, and I was like, oh my God, why did I never think about it? And as it happened thereafter, for the next 3 months, I did not attend a single FITG class. So my share of distractions, right? So I would step out of the house, I would go to a ground, meet some friends around the vicinity of that FITG center, play cricket with them. I wouldn't be very competitive in those matches just so that I don't sweat a lot. I had to look like I was coming back from an educational center and not from a coaching institute which trained me in cricket. So I couldn't sweat around. And that's the routine that I followed for the next 3 months. And then obviously it had to start reflecting somewhere. Where it started reflecting was in my academics. So it was like one of the routine tests that we had in our class, and computer science test. And it was like a 25 marks test, and I scored 2 marks out of 25, which was by far the lowest that I had ever imagined in my life. I mean, I was never a studious person, but as I said, I love to get marks, and I somehow figured out a way of getting marks, even despite my not so committed approach to studies. Now, when that happened, and the class second lowest was about 12 or 13, I very clearly recall. So there was this kind of a distribution of marks where somebody had got 2, and then the rest of the class had got 13 to 24 out of 25. So I was completely devastated. I went back home. I first of all did not even have the courage to look at my answer sheet. But then at night, when everybody slept, I took out my answer sheet from my bag and went to the washroom and just scanned through it. I just wanted to see the new version of myself who is like so vulnerable, who is like the failure that was standing right in front of me. What turned out was that there was a totaling mistake in that answer sheet. So what was shown as 2 on that sheet was actually 2.5. inconsequential, right? I mean, 2.5 hardly matters when the rest of the class is between 13 and 24. But as stupid and as innocent I was at that time, I went back to the teacher and I said that, ma'am, there is a totaling mistake in this sheet. Can you please fix it? She took the answer sheet from me. She was also looking relieved. She was like, okay, there is a totaling mistake. Fair enough. Nobody can get 2 out of 25 in my class. She got excited. She totaled up the marks. It didn't take her very long because there were just 5 half marks that she had to add up. She looked back at me and she was like a little surprised that did I miss something? So she again totaled. She again looked at back me and then she asked how many. I was like, I'm 2.5. So for 5 or 10 seconds, she did not know what is the right course of action, what is the right response to that. And then she very gracefully just tore the answer sheet and handed it over back to me. So that was my tipping point at that point of transition from where on I felt like I have to figure out a way of redeeming myself. Again, I so clearly remember this incident and some of these things just stick to you. It was about 11:40 p.m., 11:40 a.m. in the class when this had happened. And when I was walking back from my, from the table where teacher was sitting to my seat, people were making, remarks like, in logo ka dimag pagal ho jate 12 baje ke aaspas. I'm seeing it for the first time. Those are the kind of remarks. And again, I mean, it was all in good faith. I don't think there is anything to feel bad about it. It's sab हंसी मजाक चलता है, and I'm very comfortable with these things now. But उस time पे it hurt me really badly, and that's where I started figuring out that I have to do well now. From here on, I have to recover and redeem myself, and then get this conversation closed logically, which has been cut short by just tearing the sheet and handed it over back to me. So I kept that answer sheet for the next 2 years, like my prized possession, something which was very close to my heart. I never told anyone, never told my father or parents or sister anything about it. After those 2 years, when things did work out, and obviously there is a lot that happened in those 2 years, as a part of that journey. But when I cleared IIT selection, I got a rank of 560. That day, I mean, after finishing the 12th standard as well, I took out that same answer sheet and went back to that teacher. And I was like, ma'am, there is a totaling mistake. Can you please fix it? And she was taken aback that why the hell are you here to be talking about this totaling mistake for an inconsequential weekly test which happened 2 years back anyway? And then she looked at that sheet and she was reminded that there was this 2 and I had come over to get a 2.5 and she had torn the sheet. So she was first of all a little overwhelmed, and then she said that I am sorry for what happened 2 years back. And then she considered the right course of action. She cut out that 2, she wrote 2.5, and she wrote there, uh, I stand corrected, well done. And then she kind of patted me and she said that wherever you go in life, you will have a cheerleader cheering for you right here in this school. So, I mean, this journey is very, very close to my heart. And what I wanted to call out for my son and for a lot of people who are going through that phase of life was not about the fact that I got into IIT. I mean, a lot of people get into IITs and IIMs. It's like a norm now, but the failures behind it and how just by refusing to succumb to those failures, you can still overpower them. You can still figure out a way of getting over them. So that was a big message, which I felt is very important, especially for the younger generation. So that was, a little bit about this book, Matthew.
That was the story of MS-DOS, which resonates
MS
in the
DOS.
book. Right. Okay. So, Sandeep, you studied at Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, right, in Delhi. You went to IIT Delhi. You went to IMK. Uh, and these are all premier institutions, right? SPV, from a school perspective, a school in Delhi, if you were to consider, SPV is one of the top uh, choices, right? IIT Delhi, again a top choice. IMK, again a top choice. How did these premier institutions shape you?
Yeah, yeah.
That's something that a lot of our young listeners would be keen on knowing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the biggest takeaway that you take from these institutions is not about the academics. It's not about what you learn in let's say IC engine labs, or if what you learn in the chemistry labs. It's your interpersonal skills. It's the sense of competition. It's the sense of discipline. Very quickly you realize that when you make it to the IITs or IIMs, a lot of people actually struggle. And simple reality is that anyone who makes it to that kind of an institute has done something well and has basic kind of academic rigor and acumen and all that. But a lot of people struggle because suddenly you realize that you are in the middle of equally competitive and equally good people, who are all coming from similar backgrounds. There is no such thing as you are sharper or somebody else is sharper. They are all coming from that same kind of background, from that same kind of mental setup. But still, at the end of the day, somebody would do well and somebody would not. And that's where you realize that it's your work ethic, it's your discipline, it's your simple, life practices that you follow, which start to differentiate you. And I think if I reflect upon my own life in terms of what I did at IIT Delhi or IIM Kozhikode, some of these habits that I had formed in those days are still the things which define me. So, for instance, when everybody in the college days used to stay awake till, let's say, late nights, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., it's a norm. In college life, it's a norm. I used to be the one who would sleep at 10 every single day and would get up at 5 a.m. every single day. That was my routine in IIT Delhi. And even today, I kind of follow that approach that I start my day early and make sure that before the rest of the world starts to kick in and get on with the daily course, I have already made a head start of 2-3 hours of quality time. So I think that was one habit that I realized was very important. The other thing which I think I realized during the IMK days more than the IIT days was that there is just so much demand on your time. You will have so many assignments and exams and quizzes coming up that you have to become very conscious about where you are spending your time. That's the time when I realized that a lot of people tend to pick battles which they don't need to or don't have to. And I say this, a lot of times to a lot of youngsters, especially to my son: pick your battles carefully. You don't want to be fighting a battle which, even if you win, will not move you an inch from where you are. I call these battles like stray dog battles. I give him this kind of an analogy that there are times when you are moving in a car and the dog starts chasing you, barking you, and ferociously kind of jumping around. And after a while, you just move on, and the dog also stops chasing and goes back. Now, what is your approach? You don't step out of the car and start to fight with the dog. You ignore it and move on, right? Because it's a battle that is not worth fighting. I mean, somebody might just say, "Why the hell is this dog barking? I'm going to teach him a lesson." But it's not a battle worth fighting. I see a lot of people will do that right thing in that moment when the dog is chasing them, but they don't do it in real life. A lot of times they get distracted and pulled into conversations which they don't get any benefit out of, right? So you will confront people, or you will do gossiping, and you will try to play tricks, and not you as in you, but generally people tend to do that. So I feel like that recognition for the value of time came in IMK days, that you have to place a premium on your time. Don't waste your own time by playing the victim card. Don't let anybody else waste your time by intertwining his or her agenda with your agenda. You have an agenda that should be based on what are your priorities, and that's it. If your priority at this point in time, is to run marathons, or at this point in time is about writing, or managing your clients, or being with your parents or with your family and all, then that has to come from you. Others should not define what it is. And once you have defined it, then don't get distracted by what they are doing. Then let them party, let them do whatever they are doing. Don't feel good about it, don't feel bad about it. Just figure out a way of detaching yourself from all of that externality and be in your own zone. That's the thing. So Matthew, to your point, I think it's some of those softer messages or softer lessons that you learn in these institutes which truly differentiate you from what you might not be able to learn in, let's say, not so big institutes. I don't think it's about R&D, or it's about a lot of that kind of stuff. Of course, that is there. I mean, that's what shapes these people as academicians, but the real learnings are far beyond that.
Absolutely. So Sandeep, since you talked of time, I wanted to understand from you, what is the process of your writing the book and how did you manage time? I mean, you're in a very senior leadership role, right? And it's a very demanding role, I'm sure. How did you manage your time? Was there a routine that you followed, right? And I'm saying from more of a creative perspective.
Yeah,
That's one. And the second is like, how did you choose the kind of stories? Because I mean, in this entire life, there are a lot of things that I'm sure you did not mention in the book and the ones that you chose. So what was that decision like? Which ones, the ones that you'll be including in it and the ones you're not including, and more than that, the process of writing the book, the management of time and everything? Yeah.
sure. No, I think about the book itself, it's a very immersive experience, if I can use that word, in the sense that you have to almost go back in time and relive those moments to be able to do justice to those. I mean, you have to feel the moment for you to be able to write it, is what I realized. I mean, I'm also a first-time author, so I'm not sure if that's the way all authors or writers think about it. But for me, it was like a very immersive experience, and it wouldn't happen if you are in a distracted space. In the sense that if you're managing 5 or 6 things at the same time, that quality writing cannot happen. So for me, fortunately, given my running, I run about 60 to 70 kilometers on an average in a week, when I'm not doing anything crazy like 100 half marathons. And that's the time when I'm just on the road by myself, in the sense that I don't now carry music anymore when I'm running around. So it's my me time, in the sense that I can zoom in on any part of my life, I can zoom out of any part of my life, I can connect with myself, I can be very honest with myself. We it's a very difficult thing to be honest with yourself to tell yourself, you don't need to admit it to anyone, but to be able to tell yourself that this is where you were wrong, admit it, right? And that's the time when you genuinely become aware of yourself. So for me, a lot of this writing actually, Victor, happened on the field, on the track when I was running around. I'll think about, I'll go back in time. I used to recall what exactly happened, how I felt about it, what was the response, what could have been the response, all of that. And then you have to be efficient with your time as well. So a lot of times what I would come and do is, there is this kind of a speech to text software which obviously makes the task of writing a bit more efficient, in the sense that you have already thought about a lot of things. Just come back and speak it out, and get a preliminary write up for what you have been thinking about. And then of course it's that quality writing and touching, and synthesis has to be done, but it made the job very efficient. So it was no longer a case that I had to find a separate time in my daily routine to think about those things or to immerse in those experiences. It was naturally happening while I was running. And then COVID happened, and that anyway brought out a lot of restrictions on the usual things that you would do, spending time in the malls and roaming around and all that. So all of that time was gone. So that time requirement to translate those thoughts into the script actually became available by God's grace in a as a side effect of COVID, I guess.
Okay. So, Sandeep, I have this habit that when I want to think about something or concentrate on something, I tend to close my eyes to remove distractions. But
Mhm.
you are someone who's thinking and reflecting while you're out on the road, right? You don't have the liberty of closing your eyes, shutting things out. You have to be aware of where you are. You have to be aware of traffic around you. Uh, how how do you sort of channelize your thoughts while you're in that sort of a situation? I guess a lot of people would also be curious about that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think everybody has a way and a mechanism to facilitate that thought process. You're right. When you're running, you have to be mindful of the traffic, and you have to be mindful of the people who are moving around. But it still feels like you are not actively thinking about it. I mean, of course, you can't close your eyes. That is true. But you are not actively distracted by anything else. That's what I always feel. And it just naturally happens when I'm running around. It's like I'm in my own zone, and that's also the time when as I was saying, I find that I'm being most honest to myself. There have been times, and I think it has helped me evolve as an individual as well, when I admit to myself that in my office I said something to someone which was more a reflection of my own insecurity or my own lack of understanding of the situation than the person not being able to do the right thing. So I would never say it in front of him or her, but some of those realizations come when you are just in your own zone, when you know you are not being judged. I mean, I can afford to judge myself as long as others are not judging me. It's immaterial, right? So it just happens. And George, also the fact that I do a lot of my runs in a stadium, in a Tao Devilal stadium, which is very close to my place. So that traffic and those kind of things are taken care of. But yeah, I mean, it's like everybody has to find that right kind of mechanism that works for them. I know closing the eyes is another thing which works nicely. I mean, when I sleep in the night, I do, before you fall asleep, actually, there is that kind of a little bit of a sweet time when you have closed your eyes and you are in your own zone. That also happens to be a good quality time that you can use to think.
So, Sandeep, now I want to double click on your global role that you have, right, in
Mhm.
your profession, and it's a very important thing, especially in today's world, about sustainability. So, can you
Yeah.
talk to us more about the role that you have and why it is so important for all of us to understand about sustainability, and what can we, at a personal level and also at an organizational level, do
Yeah.
to enhance the cause of sustainability?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Again, my sense is that as humans, we tend to be very reactive to situations that come our way. So some problem comes your way, and you will react to it, and you will figure out a way of acting upon it, right? But some of the bigger crises that the world is exposed to in terms of climate change, or social challenges that the world is facing, or any kind of supply chain issues that we are facing in the form of trafficking and anti-labor kind of practices across the supply chain. These are very subtle things, in the sense that they don't come your way and hit you hard on your face in the moment. These are all things which are like small ticking bombs, which are ticking for sure, but they will explode, let's say, a couple of decades down the line. So this is a realization that happened to me around 2010, and we did not necessarily have a sustainability practice back then in Accenture in India. So I went back to my leadership and I said that this is something that the world is beginning to talk about. Why don't we do something around it? So there was no real business case for it at that point in time. I know today it is like the in thing, everybody's talking about it, but in 2010 there wasn't a business case as such to be investing in sustainability. So my mentor had told me at that point in time that we will support you. We cannot line up investments to do hiring and all of that kind of stuff. But if you are keen and committed to it, why don't you become the first member of this practice and continue to be the only member of this practice for a little longer till we feel like, yes, this space is actually something which we should start to invest in. So that was the genesis. So I don't know, it was a gut feel or was it something like an intuition? But I think it was a part of that same process that I was telling, that I started to think about life a bit more closely than what I used to before that. So I felt like this was my way of becoming more responsible in terms of being a professional as well as a citizen. Now, as it has evolved over the last 13 years since then, things have obviously taken a big change. And what was like that slow ticking bomb is now a challenge which is here and now. Climate crisis is no longer something which will impact you several decades later. All of what we are seeing in the form of extreme weather incidents or things like floods and droughts, one part of the country is suffering with the droughts and the other part is drowning. All of these are repercussions which are already beginning to see. And that's where the big challenge that we try to solve for and address as a part of this practice. Now, as I said, I was like the first member of the team. Now we have almost about 175 members across 3 different locations across the globe. So net zero transitions, climate change, responsible value chains, green technology, sustainable cloud, all of these things are like things that have evolved, both the way our clients think about it, the world thinks about it, and we as Accenture help them kind of address some of these massive challenges. So I think it has worked very nicely in the sense that it was a classic convergence of personal commitments and professional aspirations. I feel like I have been blessed in the sense that I have been able to grow quite significantly and at a rapid pace in leading this team and kind of delivering on this role. And I also get that satisfaction that it's not just a commercial pursuit, because the genesis was to be able to become a responsible citizen. So things have been very good. God has been very kind, and I feel like if I were to go back in 2010 and kind of make another choice about my career, I would still invest in that same space where I am today.
Right. So I was listening to a video of yours somewhere you had given this short interview where you say that not all organizations can go for all the 17 SDGs
Mm.
that are there, right? And this organization should choose for themselves. So how should organizations choose which SDGs are there? I mean, is it part of their vision based on that or the business they're in? What are the kind of considerations that organizations should have before they choose the ones that they think they can make an uh, sizable impact?
No, absolutely. And you are absolutely right. One cannot choose all the 17 SDGs. It's like saying that you have to boil the ocean. That can't happen. But then, depending on which industry you are a part of, there are some natural linkages to some SDGs. So, for example, if you are a very people's-oriented business, or let's say a very services-oriented business, then obviously the influence and the impact that you can have on people is much more than what you would be able to have, let's say, as a manufacturing company, right? So we, for example, Accenture is a technology services company, a very heavily people-centric business. We have about 300,000 people in India and about 700,000 globally. Now, our way of making an impact is one of the things is that we do this kind of a program called Skills to Succeed, which is to say that we go beyond just the usual campuses, but in the broader societies that we operate in, we impart the right kind of skills with the view to give them the job opportunities and make them more kind of self-reliant in terms of livelihoods creation and all that. So clearly people-centric SDGs is something that we are very naturally positioned to be operating in. If you think about, let's say, a company which is very heavily involved in manufacturing, which has workers, the blue collar workers on the shop floors doing things, their health and safety is a big consideration. If you're thinking about, let's say, metals and mining companies, very resources, capital intensive businesses. So the kind of impact that they can have in terms of emissions, in terms of climate change, is much more than what we as a services company can have, for example, being more people focused. So I think the idea is that you understand what are the levers that you are more closely working with by virtue of the industry that you're operating in, and then prioritize that, what these are the 5 or 6 things that I am naturally positioned to be able to create an impact on. So for example, think about all these consumer goods companies like Unilever and Nestle's and Danones of the world. they have a very heavy reliance on upstream agro-based raw materials. So by virtue of that, they are naturally positioned to be able to think about agricultural practices, think about what kind of impact they can have with the farmers and those kind of communities, which provide a natural supply of raw materials to them, right? So they can think about them more closely. And the moment you start to do that, things like zero hunger, zero poverty, livelihood generation, all of those things become naturally amenable to their impact. So I think, Victor, that's the key. Understand the industry, understand which levers it is naturally positioned to work on, and then for it to be sustainable, you also need to have a business case for it. I mean, we as businesses are in the business of making profits. And I don't shy away from saying that. I mean, it's not a philanthropic world. Businesses are in the business of making profits, creating shareholder returns. But the idea is that you can identify your area of impact in a way that you still create a positive impact while not compromising on your businesses. I mean, if I were to apply that to myself personally, I'm not a socialist who is here to change the world. I am a professional who has professional aspirations as well. But then I could find that sweet spot in terms of running 100 half marathons in 100 days while creating awareness about air pollution, because that's a natural convergence which allows me to pursue my profession and also be socially responsible. I think that's the same mantra which applies at a much grander scale when you talk about organizations.
Awesome. Sandeep, we are almost nearing that 1 hour mark. Victor, do you have any really pressing questions? Because what I felt from the last 5 minutes is that we need to call Sandeep back again to talk just about this,
Yes,
right?
sure.
Sometime again, when you have time, Sandeep, we'd like to listen to you tell, and so that, I mean, this is pressing, right? And the more platforms that this gets expressed in, I guess people will realize more. It'll seep in at an individual level, and then individuals become organizations, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it will go up to organization levels, to the country level, etc. So we need to have a much longer discussion
for sure.
on sustainability. So um,
It will
Victor,
be my pleasure.
can we?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. I think we need a much longer discussion on this because this requires a lot of awareness, right? This requires a lot of awareness, and a lot of things are in our hand at an individual level, right? So maybe for this episode, one last question from my end would be, Sandeep, what are the little things that we as individuals can do, right, to make a small impact from our end, right? Not a large scale, but even the little thing that we can do, right? If you can throw some light on this.
So I'll actually quote an incident that comes to mind, and there was this gentleman. I was in a conference and I was on the dais and I was making a speech and all that kind of stuff. And there was this young student, must have been about 16, 17, max 18 years old. He was like, "What do I need to do to be able to address the social issues that our country is facing and some of the macroeconomic considerations?" And I was like, "Hang on, don't overthink. At times we just as humans tend to think a lot about the bigger issues and all of that kind of stuff. I think the saying that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step is so apt, and it is so true. I told that gentleman without any offense that you are too young to be thinking about all of this. Mr. Modi and all the politicians and all the economists, they are all here to address some of those bigger challenges. But in your quest to solve those, don't forget that you need to take care of yourself. You are nobody right now, right? And my point to him was that just focus on making your career. Just be honest to yourself. Just be disciplined. Just do justice to your academics. Just do justice to your extracurriculars. You evolve as a good citizen, and there would be a cascading impact. If that can happen with 1.4 billion people, then the country and the world will automatically become a great place to be and to live in. So my simple message to the youngsters who might be listening in here is invest in yourself, inculcate good habits, and smallest of things, getting up early in the morning and not getting distracted, placing a value on your time, not playing the victim card, all of those very simple behavioral things. If people can do right, rest assured, the magic would happen at a much grander scale by itself. One wouldn't even need to think about it. It just is a natural follow-out of that. So Victor, that's my key message to you and the youngsters.
Okay, so it is about the similarity between a better world and running half marathons is that take the next step. Just be sure of the direction that you're going in, right? So
Exactly.
I think it's about taking steps after steps, but as
Every
long as it's
step
in the
in
right
the right
direction,
direction. Every step in the
right?
right direction is a step worth taking, as I
True.
always say. So it is so
Great.
important that you called it out.
Nice. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks a lot, Sandeep, for your time and for all that gyan, and also for writing that book, right?
Yes, yes.
So, yes,
No, no, no.
We'll be
we,
we'll
Thanks
be
to
we'll be
both of
putting a
you.
link. We'll be putting a link to the book in the description, so anyone who
Sure.
wants to buy can get there. Great. Yeah,
Wonderful. And a big thanks to both of you. I have to admit that last 1 hour just went by. I didn't even realize that we are
yeah,
almost at the top of the hour. And
that's true.
honestly, it almost feels like I have relived my life in the last 1 hour. We talked about just about
Abs-
everything, and it's such a good platform for everyone, be it students or be it working professionals, to just dial in, listen into these conversations. I'm sure the two of you are going to do a lot of magic with such similar conversations. So thank you for having me here, and all the very best to both of you.
Thank you so
thank
much,
you.
Sandeep, and we
Thank you,
also
Sandeep.
love to have you back again at some
It will
other
be
point
my
in time.
pleasure.
Absolutely
I
great.
look forward to that. I look forward to that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.